How's it going, everybody? Jack here. The CIA currently's got me pushing too many pencils, but not as many as the writers and developers working on Age of Sigmar. Because last month I did upload a trailer to the upcoming Age of Sigmar RTS with a bunch of you guys leaving some comments expecting me to explain further, and I did promise that I would do so, but left and did not explain anything. Okay, the thing is that while I was struggling in Photoshop trying to explain this game like I've done in some previous Warhammer titles before, I realized that it would have been quite silly to explain gameplay of something that I had seen but not had my own hands on. But having been invited to play a beta build of this game, I can finally share my opinion on it and what impression it left on me. Now, what is Realm of Ruin? Well, Realm of Ruin is an RTS set in the Age of Sigmar. To make it short for the uninitiated, this was a universe that came to be in response to Games Workshop lack of sales of the fantasy models, and also due to a little MacGuffin where they took some notes from the Mad Ward's Ultramarine Odyssey. That is a dead horse that I will never tire of kicking down, and spraying a little bit of that on the fantasy lore and creating something called the End Times. Like nothing ring Warhammer, as well as some cataclysmic event or a prophecy of some hope and or absolute destruction. The point is that the writing was bad, characters were rendered far from what they used to be, and fans obviously didn't like that. As a response to that, the Age of Sigmar was created, rectifying a bunch of things and introducing some cool stuff, like the obvious Sigmarines. And believe it or not, they were even bigger Marisus than the Ultramarine ever have been, with their propensity to respawn when killed, Jedi mind-tricking support into existence, and how they help capture Slanesh with a big-ass magic chain and locked her back in the closet and threw away the closet. And that's not even a joke, like you can ask Teclis and or Tyrion, they were present there. Now fortunately, some revamp in the lore seriously reduced their demigod status, making them much more interesting, and this game, at least its campaign narrative, aims to do the same for them and for more other factions. Well, a thing that is to be noted here in terms of the narrative that may or may not disturb some people is that it is kind of akin to what we've seen in Dawn of War 3, in that we are seeing the narrative from 4 different perspectives. And I'm saying that it may disturb some people because some will consider that as something that breaks immersion, but personally I don't really mind. And having played an introductory part of the campaign for the Stormcast, this is what I've learned. At its core, we follow a Dawnbringer campaign led by a Stormcast Eternal called Sigrun, who has to help her fellow Stormcast navigate through Gur, the realm of Beast, in search of a secret energy source to help them turn the tides of war. Much like in the wider lore of Age of Sigmar, the forces of Order dispatches Dawnbringer Crusaders into the realm to reconquer it from the wilderness, by establishing fortress settlements. So naturally enter some Orc boys, or should I call them Cruel boys here, who are native to the land and incessantly keep on launching attacks at the Stormcast fortress, trying to prevent them from achieving their goal. If Warhammer lore interests you as well as it does for me, I highly recommend picking up an AOS audiobook like Dominion, for example, that deals with the era of the beast, so to give you a better insight into the lore. From a storytelling perspective, I really appreciate that the game has fully rendered cinematic cutscenes. Like, it's not a must, but between the PowerPoint presentation that we've seen in Dawn of War, or the After Effects animation that Total War Warhammer has, or lastly then the cinematics that we have seen in this one and or games like Chaos Gate Demon Hunters, I way prefer the last one.
Gur waxes, the magic of wilds and beasts grows stronger. Had I divined the power earlier, perhaps I would not have found the mire grown so deep.
It is more than that. Commander, there is the stench of death about this place. Not just from the Aurochs.
Death comes for everyone. Eventually. Except us.
This way.
We are reforged anew. Again and again. Until all feeling of pain and caring is lost.
So that gameplay. I got to play the PvP part of this earlier along some other YouTubers and game journalists. And please do take what you are seeing here with a spoon of salt, because this was a beta build of, what was the word I was using, a bespoke event build that is in development, and as such contains some small numbers of bugs that the devs actually made us aware of, so nice on their part. Now, this plays pretty similar to Dawn of War 2, in that it is a victory point control on an oddly symmetrical battlefield, with the simple goal of draining your opponent's point to zero or destroying their base. There was, of course, a level scaling in how we were paired in the multiplayer, but the length of matches would be around 30 minutes or less. For me, it was in average around 20 minutes, which is about enough time for you to gain enough resources to reach tier 3 units, and thus ruin your opponent's day. You can queue up multiple units to be recruited, which is great, as some RTS at times tends to forget to do that. But this depending of course on how many of these units you have available and how many resources you have left. And resources is the name of the game here. You have two types, Command, the blue stuff, and Realmstone, the orange. Capturing arcane conduits will help you generate command, with the command yield being based on its region, this yellow line that you see growing on the ground. You can also upgrade your conduits so to harvest more. I wanted to say suck up more, like was it a ley line conduit, but that sounds wrong. Realmstone meanwhile is granted by capturing both arcane conduits and victory points. When it comes to aesthetics, it's pretty clean. The models, the animation and sound effects are pretty much on point. The combat especially looks good, as the movements feel weighty yet fluid enough to make them look believable. And despite there not being any sync kills, that's unfortunate, there was zero clipping here, which is a plus. Which is especially interesting to me because I did watch that video that they showcased during the Skull Showcase some time before, and of course some dev interviews on this, where they spoke at length about the development, or at least how hard they were working on keeping the fidelity of the tabletop models and having that play well with the animation, so it was nice to see that in practice. This attention to details in the animation also translates in how you navigate the terrain, as there are areas that can slow your units down, take longer to capture, or if you get the right units with you, can help you flank enemies faster. The voices and sounds were also pretty clean and varied, because you know, voice lines maketh the RTS or something like that. The Oryx sounds distinctly like my cousin from Birmingham.
Enemy in shrug range. Let's break some gits.
Your plan ain't working, boss.
And the Stormcast sounds not like Space Marines, which I don't know, for some reason I had some irrational fear that they may have sounded like that because of the helmet and stuff. Given that we didn't have access to the game's preference menu, I could not adjust the background music that, to me, was barely audible, but that's pretty much it. An interesting feature here is the combat chart, a sort of rock-paper shotgun system where each unit has a symbol that counters the other unit. Assault beats heavy, heavy beats range, and range beats assault, and that with the heroes being the exceptions to the rule. It's an interesting mechanic that in Delete clears the air about the do or don'ts when choosing what unit and when. Because the frustrating part of RTS, at least for me, tends to be knowing if a lower ranked unit can be at all effective against any enemy units. There's also a tech tree, which I must admit I barely glanced at because I was too busy winning. But the upgrades you get here are entirely based on existing units, meaning that you can change the looks and add to the abilities of these upgrades. And that possibly, given the already good roster of units available, could mean that there's rooms for more. But that's just me speculating right now. But like how we need to manage resources in capturing points, you'll have to do the same when it comes to your unit abilities, as both factions play very differently. The Stormcast are your starter faction and are therefore more well-rounded. Whether we're talking land, air, not sea unless a bug counts, they have units that can deal with everything but they don't excel in anything specifically. And that even when you use their special abilities. Which I'm not sure if it was a balance issue or this combat chart being at play here, but I did notice that when I activated my special abilities on some of my special units, it rendered them more vulnerable to certain attacks, so it is yet for me to know. When it comes to the crew boys, they do require a lot more micromanagement, and despite how in very old fashion they can produce more grunt units faster, they do rely more on trickery at the base level. But overall, I am happy that they do play very differently, and I can only hope that the same does apply when it comes to the last two factions, being the Alliance of Death and Chaos. Now, feedback to the devs. On one end, there's the minimap. There's a double clicking mechanic going on there, where you can zoom on your target and navigate around, but it renders the viewing angles very, very weird. So, probably that should be revamped somehow. The retreat button. Now, this one is the same as the charge button in the Q key. And while I do acknowledge that they've put a lot of emphasis on trying to make this very comfortable for gamepad users, those of us who are still rocking the mouse and keyboard,
the way God intended,
could of course assign the different functions to different keys, but I mean, by default, this should not be the same. It makes it very confusing. Also, the maps. Yes, I pointed out that the maps, or the one map that we got to play in, is incredibly symmetrical, and it's the typical thing, right? But from what I've seen from the campaign section, which of course cannot be directly translated into multiplayer, it could be nice to have uneven maps, or even better, ones that are dynamically changing as the game goes on. We already have obstacles that can hinder the movement of our units. Some units have the abilities to navigate the map faster. And given that the game is already very punishing with its retreat mechanic in terms of positioning, adding an extra level of difficulty in the form of an ever-changing map could be very cool. And frankly, overall, given that the game is giving me so many Dawn of War 2 vibes, perhaps copy a bit more from that. I know, the game is supposed to stand out and be its own thing, but you could capitalize on the fact that so many fans already are hooked to that kind of thing. But that's just my feedback for it. Let me know what you think in the comment section below. That said though, I really wish that this game does well because, well, Age of Sigmar does need a bit of a big up, in the same light that newer entries like Bull's Gun or Space Marines are going to do for Warhammer 40k. In any of the circumstances, the beta should be live by the time that I upload this video, so between the 7th and the 10th it will be available for playtesting, so you're welcome to join on games. I'll be streaming that live occasionally, so see you then. That said, wish you all to have a wonderful day. See you guys in the next one. Bye.